What do you do when you're not where you want to be or as far along as you want to be in your marriage? Or when you yourself wrestle with not being where you want to be in career, communication, or personal challenges while seeking unity in your marriage? I'm Ruth Jo Simons, and this is the GraceLaced podcast. I'm so happy to be joined by my favorite pastor, teacher, and GraceLaced Chief Encouragement Officer, my husband, Troy Simons. Troy is wise and godly, and there's a reason why I dedicated this book to him. So grab a cup of coffee and maybe your spouse and join Troy and me for a conversation about now and not yet in the context of marriage. Hey, what a treat it is to have you, Troy, in the studio on the GraceLaced podcast. It is like old times when you and I were podcasting together.
Yeah.
It's fun to have you.
Good to be here.
Well, we are going to get personal today.
Oh, boy.
And I know. Because I think it serves our listeners when we get real and we're just honest about what it looks like to work on a marriage. We are going on 26 years of this, and I dedicated this Now and Not Yet book to you. And let's just read that real quick. Let me read this to you, because this whole season is in support of now and not yet, pressing in when you're waiting, wanting, and restless for more, having conversations that really draw out what we do in different scenarios and situations and seasons of our lives. How do we press in all these different seasons and really start where we are? And so we're going to talk about that in marriage specifically. But this is what I wrote to you at the dedication of the book. To Troy, my closest friend for the last 25 years of this now and not yet life. You've taught me how to steward the right now in light of eternity more than you'll ever know, simply by the way you live, love, and refuse to give up. That's what I think about you, because you really have lived a very persevering kind of life. And I've seen you when things are really great, and when I've seen you when things are really, really difficult. And we've had 25 years under our belts in this marriage thing and parenting with 6 boys. Our oldest just turned 22, and our youngest is literally about to turn 11. And so in these last 25 years, we've had a lot of looking at our marriage going, hey, this is not where we want it to be. We would like to be further along in lots of different areas.
Yeah, when you read that, I feel like I can just in my head get a sense of that 25 yearsness and all of the seasons and all of the things that we've gotten to do together. And
do you have a beautiful song, like Ben Rector song or a Dave Matthews song playing while the snapshots of our lives goes by like a slideshow? I'm about to cry right now. We should renew our vows.
Well, and we're here 25 years later.
And we say it's hard won because no matter what the internet thinks is so easy or perfect in our marriage, we know that we've fought for this.
Yeah, and there's been so many just huge blessings, wonderful things, but we've kind of fought for all of them, and we've fought through all of them, as in just the trying to figure one another out and communicate. And
I think there are marriages where both spouses are kind of mild-mannered and maybe really easygoing. I'd say in general, you're pretty mild. You're really steady. You are not a roller coaster type of person, but you're passionate and deeply convicted and deeply, you really have strong opinions about things, even if you're not going to be rude about it and you're not real temperamental. But your wife is extra spicy. I am a little bit more roller coastery. I think I'm probably, I'm very opinionated, and I'm going to say so. And so when you put both of us together, when you say, we've actually fought, I'm just thinking, we're not throwing punches here, but it's we've had some strong words, and we don't back down, and we've really had to learn what it is to actually communicate well.
Yeah,
and to
a lot of sanctification there.
Submit to one another.
Yeah, because mild though I may be, like most of the time, like that when the scales tip, I'm not so mild.
You are not very
I
nice.
can be a
No,
jerk,
you
and
can
that's
be.
not fun.
I mean, it's like you get this reputation for being like super patient, super kind. Um, I don't know, like super godly. And I know sometimes I'm like the one that's like, whoa, she is a wild card, and that might be true. But when you when you go over the edge, a lot of times what comes out isn't always measured,
Yeah,
and so those have been discouraging times for me
yeah,
at
for
times
sure.
as well. And so there's been a lot of learning, and we say that right up front at the start of this conversation because I think it would be such a disservice to our listeners and our friends who've tuned in here if there is this image or this idea that Ruth and Troy are somehow two people who have marriage figured out, have parenting figured out, that we somehow walk with the Lord effortlessly and every day just wake up with renewed sense of faith and confidence in what God's called us to. I think those are things that we have to fight for every day of our lives and in our marriage.
For sure. And I don't think the point is ever like get to the point where you don't have struggles. I think that the point is get better at working through your struggles because the struggles are just going to come. I mean, every season has given us something new, some new challenge, be it parenting or business or like our own personal health or whatever it may be. And that always just ends up being something that works itself out in relationship.
Yeah, in marriage,
And
you're not doing this on your own. Whatever you're going through affects me, and whatever I go through is affecting you. And
yeah,
no two people stay the same in 25 years. That's quarter of a century. I mean, like that much time clocked together. We're not going to be the same people we started off at when we first got married.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, at the time of this recording, as we're talking right now, you've only read through what, chapter 3 of the book?
No, I think I'm starting
Oh,
chapter
look at
6 or
you.
7.
That's awesome. But I love when you actually take the time to read my books, which you do eventually on all of them.
Well, it's funny to read it because it's like, oh yeah, this has been our conversation.
Of
At
course.
times, it's like this has been a 25-year conversation.
Yes, which
and
is
it just comes
why the
out.
dedication is to you, because none of these words would have been written had they not been actually lived out in our marriage, in your counsel to me, in ministry, in all the things that we've done, like in all our business decisions and all the things
Yeah.
of moving our family from one state to another. This has been a reoccurring theme in
Yeah.
our life.
So in other words, I read the author every day. So when I read her
That's
books,
so poetic. Oh
when
my
I read her books, it's all very familiar.
Okay, so yes, you really do know the content of the book, but I will just say the theme of this message is ultimately exactly what you just said is sometimes it's not just we're so quick to wanting to get to where we think we want to go. We want to get on the other side of what's difficult right now, whether it's in marriage or motherhood or singleness or in financial trouble or pursuing our dreams or school. Or I had a great conversation with Caleb, by the way, the other day, which is going to be earlier in the season. But
Oh, podcast combo.
yes, it was
Sweet.
really good. I can't wait for you to hear
Yeah,
it.
I look forward to
So
that.
if you're listening and you haven't heard the conversation I had with Man Cup One, Caleb, about being 22 in his not now and not yet season, go back and listen to that for sure. But the my ultimate hope and my goal for this book is that every reader would one find God faithful and become a follower of Jesus that perseveres and doesn't just wait to start his or her life when circumstances get better, when everything changes, or when they get the house of their dreams, or they finally get the job they want, or they get the promotion that they think they deserve. That when their kids finally obey, or when suddenly everybody is driving and they're no longer driving their kids, all over the place. We sometimes think, oh, on the other side of this, I'll finally walk with the Lord, or I'll start praying, or, oh, when our kids are grown, then my husband and I will work on having better communication. And the goal of this book is to say, God has equipped us right now
Yeah.
to start where we are, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the season, because he is at work. We see all through scripture that he is at work. He is purposeful, and he is really preparing us for all that he has for us in the not yet that we can't even see, which has biblical context, which is the story of our entire redemption story. But right now, in marriage, in our everyday life, when we wake up day by day and we're on this property that we have been remodeling for 6 years straight, and not remodeling just to like make it pretty, but like it was a fixer upper that we had to remodel and rework so that it was more livable and actually had septic that worked, had didn't have carpet around
Oh, the things
toilets,
that
all the
did
things.
not work when we bought this.
So tell our listeners the kind of tensions our marriage has experienced because of being in the not yet season of, wow, every day waking up to not quite being where we want to be, even in the things that we're endeavoring together.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly we did buy an amazing property. The Lord provided like amazingly for us. I wake up every day and look out a huge bay window, which is actually a new bay window. We had to replace
Nothing
the old
is
one.
the same, yeah.
But this incredible view, and we've been so thankful to be here. But it was a bit of a dog when we bought it, and we knew we were signing up for a lot. We didn't realize just how much we were signing up for. And so, in those early years, when things really got going on the remodel, that was when we were writing foundations.
Yes.
And I was getting up like super early and
We've told
trying
this
to
story.
write out
We've told this part of the story in the Foundations podcast,
Yes.
right? That
Oh my goodness.
while writing a family discipleship resource, you and I were in some of the most tense
It was
seasons.
super tense.
yeah.
Yeah, super tense. And it was, there was just there was a mountain of work that very often was a mountain kind of between you and I. Like we had to kind of agree to climb to the top to look one another in the eye. And of course I had so much that I was doing on the house myself. You were writing books. We were trying to write books together. That was my first endeavor. And I don't know if it'll be my last. It
It won't be.
It
but
was
maybe we're not going to write together.
It was such a season of just being overwhelmed with all of those things. And I mean, just to be right honest, we found a ton of tension, expectations not being met, deadlines pressing. And I think to what you were saying, like we had our eye on what we wanted it to be. And it was really hard not to just put the right now, like on hold and just imagine what it was going to be. Or imagine what we had before we left.
Right.
And I think the hard thing about being present is it's really easy to live in the past on past accomplishments or past things that we've learned from the Lord. And we just kind of like, we draw on that bank account instead of like trying to fill the bank account now. Or we just like tune out in the moment and we just kind of live in the future. Like, oh, can't wait for the day.
Our marriage will be great on the other side of a remodel, rather than thinking we need to invest right this minute, right? And getting real short with each other rather than saying, hey, we get to, I think that's part of the lesson, was that we were becoming someone together and individually. And what we chose to do every single day during a really hard season was affecting who we would be on the other side. Right. So we couldn't just be like, oh, the remodel will be done, in a year or 2 years or whatever, then
life starts.
Then we're going to be the people we want to be with each other.
Yeah.
Okay, can I be real honest? And I don't think we've talked about this, but I think part of, and I don't think this is in the book exactly, so here we go. I think sometimes the not yet that you think you're longing for in marriage is thinking that your spouse is going to be who you think he ought to be. So for example, while we were writing the book together, one of the reasons why it was tense is because we work really differently. I am a deadline-oriented, well, I wrote When Striving Cease, right? I'm a recovering hustler. I am a actual, like, high-capacity, high-functioning, run really fast type of person who almost doesn't need a lot of processing time. I'm a verbal processor, so it's like, let's sit down and talk for 30 minutes, process it all out, and I'll delegate all this stuff, and I'll be like, done, you go get it. Like, that's literally how I work. Whereas you're like an internal processor. Give me 2 weeks. Let me think on it. I'll pray about it. I will really like research it, and then I'll come to you with a couple of thoughts, but don't force me into a box or a deadline. And so when you're you and I'm me, the tension can come because I start thinking the right now that Troy is, like Troy is right now, and the way he manages or doesn't manage all the things that he has to do is not good enough. The not yet of Troy being super organized, Troy being super efficient, Troy somehow being able to bust out all his writing by 6 a.m. and then being able to do all these other things and not dropping any balls, remembering all the emails, and handling everything with such grace and wisdom. Even if I didn't say it out loud, that expectation builds in my mind. And for anyone listening, it may not be that particular set of ideals that you have. You could be listening and going, "Oh, I know what it is for me. I think I wish my husband was more romantic. I wish my husband were this, that, and the other." The not yet that I'm wishing for is for when I joke, but sometimes it's like the not yet that I'm waiting for is that he would read my mind and know exactly what I want for Christmas and know exactly what would make me happy at the end of a day when I'm tired. And so we start thinking that not yet is like what I deserve, what I want. How do I get there? And so in our sinfulness, sometimes we can speed up the process. And rather than say, who is God making my spouse to be and who am I being sanctified to be in the midst of the difficult parts of our relationship, I start wanting to fix it and skip all the hard stuff and say, be that, be what I want you to be someday already.
And my
I don't
response,
think I've ever been able to articulate it quite like that. And I certainly didn't put it in the book, but I just wanted to say that out loud.
yeah. Well, and I think my response is, like, my worst response is to get angry and just say, like, this is who I am, respect me. You know? And that's not necessarily entirely a bad thing, but it can be a very bad manifestation of that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, like me for me, because this is who I am. And, you know, there's even some hypocrisy in that, because I have the same thing with you. Like, I want you to be A, B, and C, or more of this and less of that, or, you know, and I put those pressures on you, probably more from the oblique, you know, like a little more passive aggressive.
Which I
I know
I just love
you just
that
love
so
passive,
much.
You love passive aggressive.
You remember when we actually did an entire episode on my phrase, clarity is kindness, because I cannot stand passivity. Like, I am literally like, just say it to my face, or like, let's just have it all out. You never have to read my mind. Do you ever feel like you have to read my mind? I feel like the people who are closest to me probably never feel like they have to read my mind, because whether I do it well or I do it real clunkily, I think I always say what I mean and I mean what I say. But
Well, and like philosophically, I think there are always things to read between the lines, like that.
Sure.
Maybe even the person who is
Maybe I
being
don't
just
know,
totally
yeah.
upfront doesn't know, and I'm trying to understand, like, what is bringing all this to the surface, right? So that's where my mind immediately goes. But no, you are like, it's right there, it's on your sleeve, you're kind of ready to go, and I'm not like that. I'm like, you know, I've got the dark glasses, the hat, and my cards are up close to my chest, you know, and
which
I've got the poker
could
face on.
feel offensive and hurtful to me as your wife when I'm like, I am your best friend.
Yeah,
I
like,
am
where's
the
the
closest.
trust? And
right. Like,
just let it all out.
why
and,
are you not processing everything in real time and just saying it? Because I'm kind of like, you don't even need to ask, and I'm telling you what I'm thinking right now in the moment. You know, I'm like literally like, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. This is literally
well,
what I'm
and
thinking.
you know,
and
it doesn't
feeling.
always come from a position of like, I don't trust you, you know.
Right, right.
It's like, what in the world's going on in my own head, you know, let
Yeah.
alone what's going on in her head, and
Which
how
is
do I
valid.
say something that isn't going to just like, you know, make me look like an arsonist. Like, I sometimes feel like an arsonist when I do just go ahead, like when I'm in those worst moments where I'm just like, that's it, I'm done, and then it's just like, let's get this fire started, and then
And
then
I'm
it's a
always
re-
like, oh yeah, let's go.
yeah, and then you're not the fireman. You're like, oh yeah, if you're gonna be an arsonist, I'll show you what an arsonist really looks like, and then we're
So
really
bad.
rolling.
It
Yeah,
is
and
so bad
that's
because
not
I'm
good.
like, oh yeah, if we're gonna play with fire, I'm gonna win.
Yeah.
This is so bad.
It's like mutually assured destruction. It's like, you
Oh,
got
it's-
big nukes? Well, I got a bigger nuke.
It's
And
so
they're
bad.
just going.
Okay.
So, anyway.
But we didn't promise that we would be good examples on this episode. We were just telling it like it is.
Well, but we're sitting here after 25 years. and
Yes.
I do like you. I really
you too.
do like you.
I like you and love you.
I like
and
that
so
shirt too.
Well,
that
thanks.
color is so good on you.
I really appreciate it. I mean, somehow blue has turned into my color. I
And
don't
then me
know.
and my earth tones, I'm just.
Well, they work. You have very, very blue eyes. And I think if you wore blue more, it'd serve you well. Just a side note, you could get your colors done. If you're a parent like me, you hope that your children will grow up to develop an unshakable faith, to follow Jesus and live out his call on their lives in a way that brings glory to God. But you also know that our kids live in a world that can be challenging to follow Christ faithfully, which is why Summit Ministries is such a great resource. Here's how one mom described her kids' experience. I'm not capable of teaching my kids all the things they learn at Summit. I homeschool them and we read a lot of great books together, but nothing compares to what they've internalized after attending Summit. Summit takes the best of the best speakers and they plan each session in such a way that the kids can get the most out of it. That means having downtime, having fun activities, good food, thoughtful dialogue, access to speakers, staff connection, all of it. I'm sending 3 of the Simon's Man Cubs to Summit as soon as our schedule allows, hopefully next summer, and I'm so excited for them. If you have a child between the ages of 16 and 22, send them to a 2-week Summit experience in Colorado or Georgia this summer. Learn more and register at summit.org/GraceLaced and save $200 off the cost with the code RUTH24. That's RUTH 24. Okay, back to.
Anyway.
We digress. But I was going to say, I didn't exactly, I think I asked her permission. I never write anything without asking her permission. But in chapter 4 of Now and Not Yet, the chapter is called You Don't Have to Be Blooming to Be Growing. And I actually talk about a season of our family's lives and in our family's life as well as our marital life that was really hard because of something that happened to you personally. It was a season in which this deep investment that you had made in a career that you loved kind of came to a head, came to a conflict, came to a time where the only way forward in peace was almost not totally peaceful, but it required that you felt that it required that you walk away. And so most people don't realize and know that GraceLaced really took off and was birthed and grew out of a season where we were experiencing loss, where we no longer had a source of income that came from your full-time job, where we did not actually have a way forward in this endeavor that you and I were doing with other people. And now suddenly we were like Lone Rangers and self-employed, and GraceLaced went from being something I did on the side at our kitchen table to, oh my goodness, I need to help support our family. We have 6 children. And I didn't tell that story in real time online because that wasn't a story that we were ready to tell. And it still isn't a story that I would tell any details of right now. But it really is a story that I want to bring up because I think so many people are listening, whether you're going through it now or you will in the future, but so many marriages are affected when real life hurts come in career or in a midlife crisis or in betrayal or in a change and shift in vision, whether it be from somebody else that you're partnering with or in yourself, when something where you're like, I think this is what we're going to do together and individually. This is my career. This is my goal. This is my trajectory. And when something shifts, and a lot of things could happen, right? It could be your physical health. It could be what somebody else did or didn't do that affected your career. It could be your own heart and what you want. But when one spouse has a totally different trajectory come up, it affects the whole family. It affects a marriage. And I was thinking about how that very season, while it was really about you healing and you growing and you taking some time to say, Lord, what do you have for me, Troy Simons, in the days ahead? But it really became a multi-year. I mean, yes, in a few years' time, it seemed like we were blooming and GraceLaced was taking off and I was building this little team and we were getting it done and my books were doing well. So from the outside, everybody out there could see, wow, look at the Sidens family is doing great. Look at how Ruth is super successful and things are great. And they're they're not going through a season of loss, but behind the scenes, it was loss and pain and sadness that actually even drove this move that got us into a 6 year long remodel. And so going back to that whole issue of me being super upfront and just saying and processing and speaking out everything that I'm going through, it took you several years to really process what had happened. It took you several years to work through forgiveness and to have reconciliation be at the heart of the way you felt about so many of the things that had transpired. It took you several years to process who you were as a person, as a gifted communicator, as a investor of others, a shepherd, a teacher, a pastoral kind of like with all your giftings, it took you years. And I remember I was about to tell this story just earlier, but I was like, without context, our listeners won't get it. But a few years ago, you and I went to dinner here in Colorado, and we were right smack dab in the middle of, are there people to hire here in Colorado where we are? How are we going to do what we're doing? And what's going to happen here because you've had a few years of not being in that career. What are you doing? And I remember sitting there at dinner. I remember what we were eating. We were eating this amazing bulgogi bowl with risotto, and we're at this nice restaurant. And I lean in, and you're being real quiet here. We're like on a date night, trying to like really get to the heart of what we should do together. And I lean in and I go, super dramatically. I mean, it was like the soundtrack for the movie should have been playing, and the camera would have panned 360, and I lean in and I go, Troy, what do you want? Do you remember this conversation? And it seemed like such a simple question, but I think I was like crying, and I literally leaned in and I was like, what do you want? What do you really want? Because you had given so much in the last several years from that time to help me build my career. You had made sacrifices to make sure that our family was healthy while GraceLaced was growing and building and all these things were happening. And I knew that it was a season for you to press in and for you to grow. And so speak a little bit to how that season affected our marriage. And really, I think what I would love for you to share is, how would you encourage somebody who is walking through some not yets in their own life? How do we start right now to build into our marriage even when there's a not yet happening in our own lives?
That's a big question. And I remember that night, and I remember you asking me, and I don't think I had the answer at that point. Mm-hmm. You know, when you, be it the man or the woman, or when you go out the door to go to work, it's not like you just like turn your marriage off and then you turn your job on. You know, like you're a married guy wherever you go, you're a married woman wherever you go, and in all that you do, and it all has a tremendous amount of influence. And certainly for a guy, I know this is true of women too, but I think especially so for men, you know, we define so much of who we are by what we do, you know. Like I meet somebody new, and within the first couple of questions, I'm like, so what do you do for a living? You know, and it's something that is obviously super important to us. And so, you know, that whole school situation was born out of like even my own experience of being majorly frustrated with an education that like corrupted me morally. Did not give me a good education, you know, growing up.
Yeah, you were investing in a career.
And it was something, it was a
reform.
passion project where I was like, I don't want the people in my community grow up with what I had. I want there to be something better. And so there was a lot of heart and just a lot of dream and vision. So, you know, it wasn't like I drove a truck and I had to stop driving trucks and go drive buses or something like that. It was like, this was something that I had dreamed of, had really felt called to, and yeah, it was a huge heartbreak, and so much of that had been defined, had defined kind of my everyday schedules and routines, and a lot of it had become my identity. I was a headmaster. I had, lots of students and parents, and I was pouring into to lives, and for that to just like come to an abrupt end was really, really tough. And because we don't just leave our marriage, like push the pause and go out and work the day and then come home and do marriage, like that all just got into the mix of, my struggles were now at home all the time. and
Yeah.
and I'm working on teaching my boys from the kitchen table instead of from the school that we had started. And so a lot of that just tension and question marks and anger and all of the other things that were rolling around in my head, they obviously had a big impact on you and the boys as you were just trying to support me and help me through that period of time. And it was a couple years, where I just, every week it was playing conversations and scenarios and what if I had this and what if they had that, and it was really, really tough, and I still had 6 little souls to tend to and to do homeschool with, and continued to have at least that opportunity to do that. But a lot of the dream, a lot of the vision, like just dried up, and had
And
to
you
really seek the Lord about that.
and you couldn't
understand.
have then seen what today might look like, right? Today, and we're not at any arrival point, but today is already a someday that at the time you were going through so much loss, you couldn't have seen. You couldn't have seen the blessings and the opportunities and the new vision and the new trajectories for
Right.
your life. And so, for all of our friends who are in marriages where either together and their marriage is not where they want to be, or individually they either walk through loss or they are in a career trajectory that they didn't expect, and right now is not where they want to be, what would you say is one way to get started right now
Yeah.
so that you don't waste today, so that you don't just, you know, kind of like numb yourself out until things change?
Well, let me give 2 pictures with a contrast. My dad worked a job where for 35 years he went to the same place, and he just had this kind of steady climb, and it was super defined. And I would imagine that my dad imagined that that was going to be, and it just happened to work out. He was there that whole time. So even if there were times when he was kind of discontent, like he looked forward and imagined, like, no, I persevered through this, and I know what the system looks like, and I know where I want to go, and I've got this retirement, and Linda and I were going to go and do things after I retire, and that's pretty much how it worked out for him. I don't think that's the way it works out for most people, especially today. And for me, as a headmaster, and that whole position of being able to serve people and bless people and have influence and authority and all of those things, my imagination for me, for our family, for marriage, for all of it was this trajectory of this school building and growing and impacting
Graduating
the
all your
community.
kids there. Yeah.
And so the hard thing about those 2 years afterward is it's to back to your question, like, Troy, what do you want? I knew what I wanted. I don't know what I want now. And so much of that had been, the Lord just like really had to peel back all those layers and say, like, let's get back to the heart of who you are, who I've made you to be, and let's untie your identity and your worth and your value and all those things from that vision that you had.
And you didn't immediately jump into anything. And I think because I'm somebody who wants to like fix a problem and get to the someday that we want and make everything feel better, I was quick to be like, well, what can we do to change the pain? Like to like fix the pain, change the scenario. But the Lord saw fit to give us a good, long, steady season where we didn't jump into anything new. We just kept on stewarding right where we were with the things that we were already given. What we were already given were 6 young boys who were learning from home. What we were already given was a business, GraceLaced, and a small staff. What we were already given was opportunities for me to write books and to just do those things well. And amazingly, I don't think this is the first time I've mentioned this on the podcast, but as of right now, the Lord has seen fit to put you in a position of being a teaching pastor and a shepherd of a local community for the last almost 2 years now. You could not have seen that coming. In fact, if I had asked you, well, when I asked you over that bulgogi risotto dinner, I don't think you would have said, hey, in my 50s, I think I'm going to start back up with a church plant. I don't think you would have said that. I think you were still wrestling with, this is what I thought it would be. I don't really know how to change my expectations. But because you persevered day by day without looking so far ahead, but started where you were, the Lord actually caused these things to flourish because you sought to disciple people right where you are, because you sought to invest right where you were, because you said, okay, I'm going to teach everything I know to the people right in my midst without thinking, where's the microphone? Or where's the church I get to serve at? Or where's the school that I'm good? You actually taught local students through a co-op. You shepherded and discipled through local community. And so maybe I'm even answering the question I was digging for a little bit, is that when we are not where we want to be, and when life has dealt us something we do not understand from the Lord's hand, where we're like, God, I know that you're purposeful, but I cannot see why you've given this to us. And we don't think we're flourishing and blooming. We start where we are and we steward what we already have. Because your marriage, even if the union is feeling like, hey, one of us is kind of like not living our dream life, or because one of us is not living our dream life, we both now feel like we're not living our dream life. We can't just wait for the dream to come true or for the circumstances to change for us to suddenly be like, I like you, I like us, look at who we've become. No, who Ruth and Troy are today in 2024 is on account of all the little things, the thousands of right nows we chose day by day along the way, right where we were with what we'd already been given.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it from a scriptural standpoint, a theological standpoint, and you recognize that Christ has risen, right? And our salvation has been complete, and we have righteousness in Christ, and yet there's a need for us to be sanctified, and yet God is still working on us, and he's content to keep working with us. And when you, I don't know, maybe a good conversation that a couple could have in thinking through what we've just shared with them is to say, wow, babe, what would it be like? What would we have if your job just disappeared today? What would we have if your health failed today? And my vision of like where I think we're going to be next year or 5 years or 10 years, or at the end of my career when I'm retired, and then we are doing whatever the next thing is after that. Like, what if that doesn't go that way? What do we have? Discussing what you do have, and making sure that you've ultimately got your hopes set on the right thing.
And
right?
that you're building and investing.
Yeah. And recognizing that God is building and working and investing like today. I think that's the thing that, like, when these other things that are big, important things get totally, obliterated, and they're just suddenly out of our lives and we feel that pain, we have to go back to what we know we do have. That's an unshakable thing. Like Peter talks about in 1 Peter 1, we've been given an inheritance that is undefiled, unperishing, kept in heaven for you. And those are the things that we look at and say, the rest of it can go away.
Yeah.
And will eventually. Like, we're going to lose it through death, if not some other means. That defines the right now in a very different way, and takes the conversation of like what we would like to have, those things that are driving us. Those very things might just end up in smoke and ashes.
We're aiming for something.
that isn't bigger.
Yeah.
And that helps us steward the things that are temporary much better. Like when we have a heavenly mind and we say, Lord, help me to hold everything with open hands, so that if you decide to take it away, it's not like being wrenched from my grip and I'm shocked to my core because now I don't have that anymore. But if it comes and it goes, right? The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord is something to work toward, and certainly in the context of marriage.
Wow, that's such a good reminder that we are works in progress. And I know you and I, we ask those questions and we aim for something more eternal in our marriage so that we're not just putting our hope on transient things like, how much hair we have or don't have, or what we, how.
You had to go there.
I know, I had to go there.
Had to go there.
We're not banking on career and where we live, how much money we have, because those things can and will change. So we're building our marriage, even today in our 26th year, so that when everything else changes, the two people that God has chosen to put together will be honoring and glorifying Him together, because that's what we were meant to do first and foremost, ahead of everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe just a closing thought, because it just jumped into my mind, but I probably need to think more about the fact that you are going to walk the streets of heaven one day with Jesus. And my call as a husband to love you and to minister the word to you and to see you sanctified and essentially prepared for that day when you're with the Lord. That really should define what I do. And that is the kind of thing that when I am moving toward that, all of the circumstances that we might find ourselves in that are just really unpleasant, ultimately are going to find themselves eclipsed by the greater goal of making sure that we are moving toward Christ-likeness and that day when we get to be with Him.
Amen. It's a really good goal. Thanks for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to have these conversations more and more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's conversation. We'd be so honored if you take a minute to write a review about the podcast to help others find it and know what to expect.